Hi friends, it's Alyssa and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm gonna be making 5 easy and delicious freezer meals with you. All right, so today I wanna get 5 of these freezer meals done. My freezer's getting low. I've kind of gone through quite a few of the freezer meals that I had made prior to back to school, so I wanna fill it back up. So I'm just gonna make 5 separate meals. One is a breakfast and the rest are gonna be dinners. So one of the meals is actually gonna be homemade pizza. So I just wanna make like bag kits that have pizza dough and then homemade marinara sauce, cheese, all of that ready to go in the bag. So if I wanna make homemade pizza one night for dinner, I don't have to make the dough and do all of that, which I don't really wanna do most days. So I'm gonna do it in advance and get that in my freezer. So I'm gonna make my homemade marinara sauce. I have everything ready to go back here. I'm gonna start with this first because the marinara sauce needs to simmer on the stove for about 45 minutes to an hour or so. So I'm gonna go over here and I'm gonna show you the ingredients I have lined up to get that started. Okay, so here's everything I'm gonna be using for my marinara sauce. This is just a simple, easy marinara sauce. I have 2 cans of these peeled whole tomatoes. I have my olive oil, an onion, some garlic, some fresh garlic, and then for seasoning I'm having basil, oregano, and then I'm just gonna do a pinch of crushed red pepper flakes, and then salt and pepper, of course. So I have my large pot here. I'm gonna get everything in here, and then it's just gonna cook on low simmer for about 45 minutes to an hour. Okay, so in this pot, I'm going to be doubling my normal recipe. So I'm gonna be using 2 cans, they're 28-ounce cans of the peeled whole tomatoes. Just like my sauce that I had showed in one of my last videos, I'm gonna be smashing these tomatoes with my hands. Okay, so the tomatoes are in there. I'm gonna take my rings off and I'm just gonna kind of smash these, get them going. I'm not wearing an apron and I'm probably gonna hate myself after this. Hopefully I don't get anything on me, but both my aprons are in the wash, so I don't have anything to wear for this. All right, next I have my onion. I just cut it up and I peeled it and then I cut it up into 4s. All right, so I don't want onion in my sauce, on my marinara sauce, but I want the flavor of onion. So rather than use onion powder, I wanna use real onions, which is why these are gonna simmer on low in the tomato sauce, and then I'm gonna pull them out at the end. And then I'm also gonna put in, I think I have about 4 or 5 garlic cloves here that I mashed up. These I'm gonna be mashing them once they simmer on low with a fork, and those will stay in the sauce. So I'm just gonna put in a couple tablespoons of olive oil, and then next I'm gonna put in a couple teaspoons of basil, and then also a couple teaspoons of oregano, and then just a pinch of the red pepper flakes that I have here. But I'm gonna kind of mash them with my hands. I don't want it too spicy. You can definitely put more if you like a little bit of kick with your marinara sauce. I have my kids, so I don't want to freak them out with some spicy marinara sauce on our pizza. So I'm just going to put a touch of it so we can have a little bit of the flavor. And then lastly, I'm going to put in some salt and then some pepper. Okay, so I'm just going to get this mixed up. And then since this needs to simmer, I'm gonna get this pushed on my back burner and get it out of the way. I'm gonna turn it on medium to high power so it can come to a slight boil, and then I'm gonna turn it down and it's gonna simmer for the rest of the time. Okay, so while my marinara sauce is on the stovetop simmering right now, I'm going to get started on my next meal, which is gonna be a soup. So we're heading into fall and cooler weather. I love soup during this time of year, so I definitely want to get something stocked in my freezer that I can pull out for my family. And one of our favorite soups is my Zuppa Toscana soup. I've showed this recipe before in the past in a previous video, so I'm going to show it again. It's so good. I have everything lined up behind me ready to go, so I'm going to just go down the lineup of ingredients before I get started. Okay, so here's everything for my Zuppa Toscana soup. So I have some chicken stock here. I made some homemade chicken stock in my crock pot about a week, 2 weeks ago. I can link the video above. I did film it and make a meal prep video with it, so I can share that with you if you want to make your own chicken stock. So this was frozen in my freezer, and I had pulled it out and I had put it in some cold water, and then I just got it defrosted enough where I could start breaking it up into chunks, and then I'm just gonna put this into the pot and let it cook the rest of the way in the pot. And then I have my kale, which I need to wash and cut up. I have 5 potatoes here. So the recipe calls for 3 to 4 large potatoes. I didn't have large, so I just have medium-ish ones here, so I'm going with 5. And then I have half of an onion. I have some fresh garlic. I also have a pack of ground beef. So my recipe calls for a split of sausage and then also beef. And if you want to use sausage, I like to use the mild kind of like country sausage in this. But I don't have sausage on hand for this recipe. I do have sausage, but it's for one of my other meals I'm going to be making today. So I'm just going to go with ground beef. I've done it before with just ground beef and it's still very good. So I have a pack of that. And then for seasoning, I'm going to use Italian seasoning and then salt and pepper. And then I also put a can of evaporated milk into this as well. So I'm going to get my kale and potatoes washed up and then get everything cut up and ready to go. So my soup needs to cook on the stove top, cook the potatoes down, all of that for a good while. So that's why I'm getting on this next. So this can cook on my stovetop, then I'll get started on my other meal. Okay, so everything's been washed and ready to go. So let's get it all cut up. All right, so now that that's all pretty much chopped up and ready to go, I have my potatoes, my onions ready to go. I did about 3 garlic cloves over here. I just mashed those up with my knife to get them broken up, and then I'm gonna put those into my garlic masher into the soup. I have my kale pretty much ready to go. I just need to give it a good rough chop, but I have one more left. I wanted to show you how I pull the leaves off of the stem. It's an easy way to get leaves off of your kale stem. So you're just gonna hold the stem down at the bottom, and then you're gonna pull your hand down the stem as you break off the leaves. And then it easily comes off just like this. I used to buy the packaged kale that's already prepped and ready to go from the store, but when they prep those bags of kale, they put the stems in with it. It's all like chopped up and ready to go with the stems, and I don't like the stems, the hard crunch in my soup, so I like to buy it like this so I can prep it the way I want it. So I'm just gonna give a good rough chop on the kale over here, and then we'll move over to my stovetop to get the soup going. So in my pot here, I'm gonna start with a mixture of butter and olive oil. I like butter when I saute my onions a lot of the time, so I always put a couple tablespoons of butter to let that melt down. And then along with the butter, I do also put a little bit of olive oil, so just a little drizzle. I'm gonna let that heat up, melt down the butter, and then I'm gonna get my onions in here first to saute for a little bit. So I'm just gonna cook the onion for just a few minutes until they start getting a little translucent. So now I'm gonna get my ground beef in here, broken up. So this is just a pound of ground beef. If you wanted to do sausage in it too, like I had said earlier, you could do half a pound of ground beef and then half a pound of sausage. If you want to just do a pound of ground beef and then throw in a little bit of sausage, that'll work too. You could do half a pound of sausage with a whole pound of ground beef. So I just added in the seasoning. So I did about half a tablespoon or so of Italian seasoning, about 3 teaspoons or so of salt, and about a teaspoon of pepper. Now I'm just gonna mix this all up. Now I'm just gonna get my garlic into this. Like I said earlier, I'm doing about 3 cloves of garlic. Next, I'm just gonna get my potatoes in here before I add in my broth. Okay, so now I'm just gonna get my broth into this. So now I'm just gonna get my lid on and I'm gonna let that broth melt down a bit. And then once it melts down a little bit more, it'll be easier to mix it up. Okay, it's only been like a minute or so with the lid on, and now I'm just going to break up the broth to help it melt down better. All right, so if you're gonna use canned chicken stock, that's fine too. I've done it that way and it's also very good. You just wanna make sure you have 4 cups or so, maybe 4 or 5 of chicken broth for the soup. If you need a little more liquid, you don't have enough chicken stock, that's fine. You can pour in some water. I've done that too, and it will still be just as good. All right, I'm gonna put the lid on and let that kind of come to a boil before I get in my kale and my evaporated milk. So while I wait for my soup to come to a boil before I add in my kale, I'm gonna get started on getting some items ready for my next meal, which is gonna be a breakfast casserole dish. I need onions, so I'm just gonna get my onion diced up for that. And then that'll be the next meal that we get going on. Okay, so I just needed about a half a cup of diced onion for this. So I'm just gonna set this aside. I think my soup is boiling now, so I'm gonna move over to that. And I'm gonna get my kale and my evaporated milk into it. All right, so I'm just gonna turn down my burner a little bit for the soup. Mix it up. So this seems like a lot of kale, but it cooks down just like spinach. It cooks down so much. It's definitely not gonna be this much once it fully cooks down. I was kind of deciding, trying to figure out if I wanted to do the whole can. My recipe says to not do the whole can, but I think every time I'm always like, what the heck, and I just pour the whole thing in. So I just did that. So I did the whole can of evaporated milk, and then I just did, I would say at least 3 cups or so of kale. Mine was probably more than that, because like I said, I like a lot of kale. See, it's already cooking down so much. So if you do a little bit more, it's definitely not gonna be too overpowering or overwhelming in the soup. Okay, so I'm gonna move this to my back burner on the other side, and then I'm going to let this cook on medium low with the lid on for probably another 5 or so minutes at least to make sure my potatoes are fully cooked through. So like I said a little bit ago, I'm gonna be making a breakfast casserole. So this is the lineup of everything I'm gonna be putting into my breakfast casserole. So you're going to need the diced onion, like I said. I'm gonna saute it in some butter and then also some olive oil. I have some sausage here, and then I have 8 eggs, some milk that I'm gonna whisk up with the eggs. I'm gonna put a dash of some Tabasco sauce, and then I'm also going to put in some smoked paprika, salt and pepper to taste, some fresh garlic, and then I also have some older bread here. This is my homemade bread that I make. I'll link a video above where I show how I make this. So I'm gonna cut this up, and this is going to go into the casserole as well, and then I also have some Parmesan cheese. So I have about 2 tablespoons of butter that I'm letting it melt down, and then I also added in about 1 tablespoon or so of some olive oil. I'm letting that all heat up, and now I'm gonna add in my diced onion. So this is about a half a cup or so of some diced onion. I'm gonna let this cook down for a bit, just a few minutes until it starts to get translucent, and then I'm gonna add in my sausage. All right, so the onion has been cooking for just a few. I'm gonna add in my sausage. So this is just 1 pound of sausage. You want to use some type of breakfast sausage or country sausage with this recipe. So while my sausage is finishing up cooking, I'm just going to get in my garlic. So I'm just doing 3 cloves of garlic. So I'm just going to let this finish cooking up. I'm going to move over to my island, and I'm going to get the egg mixture mixed up. So to my large bowl here, I'm gonna add in 8 eggs. Before I add my milk in, I'm just gonna kind of start mixing the eggs so it's easier to get them a little mixed up and the yolk broken up. So the sausage is done cooking, so I turned off the burner. It needs to cool for just a few before it gets added into this mixture. Okay, so now I'm gonna pour in 3 cups of milk. And then I'm gonna do about a teaspoon of smoked paprika, a couple teaspoons of salt, about a teaspoon or so of pepper, and then just a dash of some Tabasco. I don't want it too hot because my kids will eat this, so just a little bit for some flavor. For this recipe, you need about 8 to 10 cups of older bread. So my bread that I had a feeling I wasn't probably gonna have enough. So I was just short of that. So I also have my homemade sourdough in there. So I cut up a little bit of that to make sure I have enough. So we're just gonna have a mixture of some sandwich bread and sourdough bread in this recipe. So for this breakfast casserole, this is what I'm gonna put them in. I have these stainless steel pans I purchased on Amazon. You can use foil pans, that's fine. Well, I make so many freezer meals that I just decided to invest into some stainless steel pans that I can pop in my freezer. They come with lids. I got different sizes. So I'm gonna use 2 of these. I'll link those down below if you would wanna get some of these pans because they're perfect for freezer meals. So I'm gonna make the casserole in these. So I'm gonna put my bread in first, and then I'm gonna put the egg mixture and the sausage in next. So for this recipe, you can use one large foil pan. If you have a large family and you're gonna be making this for breakfast one day, you can definitely do it all in one pan. I'm splitting it up because we're a smaller family. I know we don't need that much. So I'm cutting the recipe and breaking it up into 2 different pans. So now that my sausage has cooled a good amount, I'm gonna get it added into my egg mixture, and then I'm also gonna add in my Parmesan cheese. Next, I'm gonna add in about half a cup or so of some shredded Parmesan cheese. Now I'm just gonna pour the egg and sausage mixture on over the bread. So you just wanna make sure when you pour the egg mixture over the bread that you push down the bread so it starts to soak up that egg mixture. So I'm not gonna bake these off because I wanna freeze them. I'm gonna put the lids on. These are gonna go in the freezer, and when I want to make these, I'm going to pull them out the night before out of the freezer, put them in the fridge and let them defrost in the fridge overnight, and then I will bake them in the oven the next morning. So when I'm ready to bake these in the morning after they have defrosted in the fridge overnight, they're going to bake in an oven that's preheated at 350 degrees. They're gonna bake with foil on for the first 35 minutes. Then you're gonna remove the foil and you're gonna bake for about 25 minutes. You just need to eyeball it at the end. You wanna make sure your edges are golden brown, and it may take a little bit longer or a little bit less, so at the end just keep an eye on it. So my marinara sauce has been simmering for about an hour. I removed it from the heat, and I'm going to take out the onion now that was in there. So at this point, you can let this cool and then blend it up if you want it smooth. I like to keep mine a little bit chunky. So I go in and I find all of the garlic cloves and I push them up against the side of my pan to make sure those mash up. Even there's pieces of onion still in here, and I'm fine with some pieces. I just make sure to smash them against the side of my pan, break them up with the wooden spoon, and kind of chop things up to give it some type of chunkiness. But you can definitely blend this up if you want. Everything's super tender, so it all breaks up very easily. You can mash it, like I said, it works really well now that it's been cooking for so long. Everything's very, very tender. So I forgot to mention this earlier when I did the lineup of ingredients for my marinara sauce, because it's all optional, but I do like to do this. To cut the acidity of the marinara sauce, I like to add in just a little bit of sugar. So I'm just gonna sprinkle a touch in, taste it, and then kind of decide if I like the flavor. If I need to add more sugar, then I will at that time. Okay, I just tasted it. I'm gonna add in a little bit more. So I'm doing about a tablespoon of sugar in the sauce. I'm gonna let this cool off on the side completely because these are gonna get bagged up to go with my pizza kit bags. My soup also finished up a little bit ago. I turned it off. I'm gonna mix it up, and then this is also gonna sit off on the side and cool as well before I bag it up. So the next freezer meal I want to get started on is a spin off of a dinner. It's Marry Me chicken, but this one I'm actually going to add in tortellini, and I'm going to kind of make it into a casserole dish in a way. So I have everything lined up here. I'm going to go over all of the ingredients before I get started on the meal. So here's everything I'm going to use for this freezer meal. I have 2 large chicken breasts that I had cut in half lengthwise. I seasoned them with smoked paprika, salt, and pepper on both sides. I have a cup of chicken broth. I have 2 cups of heavy cream. I'm also gonna put salt and pepper into the dish, as well as some more smoked paprika and then some Italian seasoning. I have sun-dried tomatoes here. I have some butter, garlic, spinach, a bag of tortellini that I'm gonna cook, and then some Parmesan cheese. So I just have about a tablespoon or 2 of olive oil in my cast iron skillet here. I've been heating it up to get it warm. I'm gonna cook my chicken breasts in this pan first. So I just cooked my chicken breast about 4 minutes aside, so about 8 minutes total. You just wanna make sure they're fully cooked through. And then I'm just gonna remove them and set these to the side, and I'm gonna make my sauce in the same pan. So now I'm just gonna add in about 2 tablespoons of butter. I'm gonna let that melt down and heat up just a touch. I'm also gonna add in about a tablespoon or so of olive oil. Let that heat up. Next, I'm gonna add in about 3 cloves of garlic. Now I have about a half a cup or so of sun-dried tomatoes that have been drained, and then I just gave them a good rough chop. Just gonna get these mixed up, let them saute for just a few. Now I'm just gonna add in a cup of chicken broth and 2 cups of heavy cream. Also, I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but I have a pot of water off on the side on my other burner that I had filled up with some water. I added some salt, and then I just cooked the tortellini according to the package. That finished off, so I just drained it, and now the tortellini is ready to go for this dish. Now I'm gonna add in some seasoning. I'm doing about a teaspoon or so of some smoked paprika, about 2 teaspoons or so of Italian seasoning, and then some salt and pepper to taste. I'm just gonna mix it up again, and then I'm gonna let it come to a boil. So while my sauce comes to a boil, I'm just gonna dice up my chicken breast. So you can cut this up while it's raw and do it in advance before you cook it if you wanna do it that way. I just prefer doing it this way. Either way works. All right, so now I'm just gonna get this chicken back onto the plate because look at all that juice. I wanna make sure I get that all into the dish. So this I'm just gonna set aside. I'm gonna go add my Parmesan cheese to my sauce because that is bubbling up and boiling now. All right, I turned the heat down just a touch, and now I'm gonna slowly add in my Parmesan cheese. So I have about a cup or so of Parmesan cheese. I'm gonna get that in and let that melt down. I'm gonna mix this up, let that melt down, and then I'm gonna add my spinach in. All right, so to this, I'm gonna add in about 2 or 3 cups of spinach. I'm gonna let this cook down. I'm also gonna add my chicken back in. I'm gonna mix this up really well. And then hopefully I can get my tortellini in here. It might be too much, but we'll see. All right, so I mixed that all up. The spinach is pretty much cooking down. I'm gonna add my tortellini in slowly because I'm hoping it'll all fit. All right, I'm gonna mix that up before I add the rest in. All right, so I turned the burner off. I got everything to fit. I got all that tortellini in there. So now that's all mixed up. I'm gonna let this cool just a touch, and then I'm gonna get this into, I think I can make this into 2 dinners. I've done it before, so I think I can make it work. And then I'm gonna get them into my 2 pans once it cools a little bit. So the last meal I wanna make for the freezer is gonna actually be a prep for a crock pot meal. I like to do these because they're easy to throw together when I'm prepping freezer meals. And then the day of, when I wanna get them in the crock pot, I just take it out and dump it in the crock pot, and everything's in that bag, ready to go, and I set the crock pot on, and it's so easy. So I'm going to be making the prep for chicken French dip sandwiches. So this is a really good dinner. It's a spin on the classic because obviously it's made with chicken for this one. And I have everything lined up here. I'm gonna go over all of the ingredients before we get this all into bags. So here's everything I'm gonna use for this recipe. I have 2 large chicken breasts. I have 2 tablespoons of butter that I have cubed up. I have about a half a cup of diced onion, cornstarch, beef broth. There's about 2 cups of beef broth, some minced garlic. I'm gonna use probably about 2 tablespoons or so of that, some Worcestershire sauce, salt and pepper, and then for seasoning, I'm also gonna use parsley and smoked paprika. So I'm gonna mix up all of these ingredients, and then I'm gonna pour those into the bags with the chicken breast, and then it's ready to go. All right, so I'm gonna do everything in this large measuring cup that I already have my beef broth in. So I'm gonna put the butter in when I put it all into bags so I can evenly put the same amount of butter into each bag. But I'm gonna do in the beef broth, I'm gonna do half a cup of diced onion. I'm gonna do about 2 tablespoons of minced garlic. And then I'm also gonna do about 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. And then I'm gonna add in 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. Also, I'm gonna add in about 1 teaspoon or so of parsley, and then about 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, a couple teaspoons of salt. If you're not using low sodium beef broth, then maybe cut down your salt when you're adding it in, and then some pepper. Now I'm just gonna mix this up. All right, that's ready to go. So I'm just gonna get my bags ready and get everything into the bags. Okay, so I just have 2 bags I'm gonna be doing. And I'm gonna add in 1 chicken breast into each bag. And then now I'm just gonna pour my mixture over each one. Half of the mixture into each one. These are large chicken breasts too, so if you don't have large ones, then maybe do 2 smaller chicken breasts. So now I'm just gonna break up my butter, equally distribute through these bags. So it's about a tablespoon per bag. All right, so those are all done. I'm gonna get them closed up and into my freezer. Also, I just wanna point out, I always label my bags and items that go into my freezer so I know what they are. I've done that before in the past where I think, no, I'm gonna know what this is. I don't need to label it, and then I go to get it out and I'm like, what is this? So I just wrote on here that these are the crock pot chicken French dip sandwiches. I also want to point out that these go really well with my hamburger buns that I've showed in a previous meal prep video. They go really great with that. So I'll link that video above if you want to make those homemade hamburger buns. So those are ready to go into my freezer. All right, so now that the Zuppa Toscana soup has cooled down a bit, I'm going to get it into 2 bags here and then pop it in my freezer. So just make sure to get all the air out as much as possible. Seal it up really well. And then these I'll just put into my freezer flat. They'll stack easily with the other items I have in there, and I have another 2 dinners ready to go. All right, so now I'm going to get my Marry Me Chicken tortellini casserole bake into 2 of these stainless steel dishes that I have. Like I said, I'll link them down below if you want to get them. They're great, they come with the lids. All right, so that's all ready to go. I'm just gonna get my lids on, and then I'm gonna pop these into my freezers, and now I have 2 more dinners ready to go. Now that I got most of everything into the freezer, my marinara sauce is on the stovetop here behind me, cooled off, and I'm gonna get that into bags. But before I do, I wanna get my pizza dough started, because that's all gonna go into bags as well, kind of like pizza kits, like I said earlier. So I'm going to get my yeast mixture into my bowl first. So I'm gonna show you how I kind of go about this when I make any type of bread, pizza doughs, or anything when I'm doing a yeast mixture. Okay, so when I get my yeast mixture going and I need to get hot water, I just put my faucet to the hot side setting. I let it run and let it get pretty warm, pretty hot. And then I fill my measuring cup with that. And that's what I put my yeast into, because you're gonna put your yeast into warm water. Usually recipes will say add it into warm water to start activating it. So you could put it in the microwave, your water, and you can do it that way, but I've found it can get way too hot that way. When I run the faucet on the hotter side setting, it's usually the perfect temp, and everything usually works out pretty well with my yeast. It foams up and does what it's supposed to do with that. So now I'm just gonna add in my yeast. This is the yeast mixture I'm gonna be using. This is what I usually use when I'm making any type of breads. I just use the instant yeast, and I'm gonna add that to my warm water. So I'm gonna do 2 1/4 teaspoons. And now I'm gonna add in a tablespoon of granulated sugar. So this is just gonna start activating it, feeding the yeast. And then I'm gonna let it sit for, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes until it gets all bubbly and foamy, and then it's ready to go. Okay, while I wait for my yeast mixture to get bubbly and foamy, I'm going to get my marinara sauce into some bags. So I'm just gonna use one of my drinking glasses, and I'm gonna get a sandwich size Ziploc bag inside, and then I'm gonna pour the marinara sauce right in here. So just like this, I'm gonna get all the air out. And there's one bag of marinara sauce. Okay, so I got 4 bags of marinara sauce. So 2 of these are gonna go into my pizza kits, and then 2 of them I'm just gonna put in the freezer for pasta or another pizza in the future where I make new dough. So I'm just gonna get 2 of these set off on the side and 2 of them into my freezer. Okay, so it's been about 8 minutes or so, and it's starting to get all foamy on top. So I'm gonna get the rest of my ingredients added in and then get this on my mixer. I'm gonna do about 1 teaspoon of salt and then a teaspoon of garlic powder. I like to put garlic powder into my pizza dough. It adds a nice flavor. About 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And I'm gonna add my flour in. So I'm gonna do about 3.5 cups or so of flour. So now that the flour is all added in, I'm gonna get this on my mixer. It's gonna mix up, and it needs to mix for about 2 or so minutes. So that just took about 2 minutes to get that all mixed up, maybe a little bit less. So now I'm gonna turn it back on, and it's gonna knead for 5 minutes. Okay, so my dough has been kneading on the mixer for about 5 minutes, and it's pretty much ready to go. If you are making this and you find that it's still too sticky, it's sticking to your hands, you don't want that. You wanna add a little bit more flour as you mix it, just a little bit at a time, until it no longer is sticking to the sides of the bowl, sticking to your hands. You can poke your finger in, it kind of bounces back. It's ready to go. So I'm just gonna get this out on my counter. And then I'm just gonna split this up. Okay, so I have my sandwich bags here that I put my sandwich loaves in. These I just get from Walmart for super cheap. This is what I'm gonna put my pizza in. So I'm gonna just drizzle some olive oil. I'm gonna toss this in. Kind of get that all good to go. I'm just gonna tie a knot in it like this. And then this is gonna go into the bag with the rest of the stuff for the pizza kits. So in this kit, I'm just gonna keep it simple. I'm gonna put my dough, my marinara sauce, and my mozzarella cheese. I've done it before where you put toppings in with it, but I always usually have some type of toppings for pizza on hand. Pepperoni, olive, tomato, and basil. I usually have something that I can put on this, so I'm not gonna decide what we would want on our pizza right now. We'll decide that the day of, depending on what I have at home. So I'm just gonna keep it simple, do the dough, the sauce, and the cheese. Okay, so now I have 2 pizza kits for the freezer, so 2 other dinners. So when I want to make pizza, there's 2 different ways you could do this. You could take it out the night before, when you know you're gonna make pizza the night before, and get this in the fridge and let it defrost in the fridge, and then you would just take your dough out about an hour or so before you wanna make pizza to let it sit on your counter to kind of proof up, and then you can make your pizza. If you forget, like me a lot of the time, and you don't take it out the night before to defrost, you can take it out the day of, but you have to do it at least, I don't know, I would say a few hours, probably at least 4 hours or so in advance to let your dough defrost on your counter, and then it needs to proof up in that time frame as well. So you wanna make sure you give it enough time. So around lunchtime or so, take it out, let it sit on the counter and do its thing, and then you can make pizza that night. That usually works for me. So I'm gonna get these 2 in my freezer. All right, everybody, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this freezer prep video. I'm so happy with everything I got done. I got a handful of dinners, some breakfast meals, and this will help me out so much when I'm too tired to make anything on those busy days. So if you make any freezer meals, which I'm sure you do, make sure to share down below what you like to make for your family. I would love some new ideas, maybe some inspiration. So I would love to hear all about it. All right, so I'll see you all in my next video. Bye.